The first time the old woman called 911, it sounded like a routine welfare check. Her voice trembled, but she was coherent, polite, almost apologetic. "There's someone living in my walls," she said. "I can hear them breathing." Dispatcher Emma Reyes had taken stranger complaints on the night shift: phantom noises, imagined prowlers, neighbors feuding over parking spots. She sent a unit, logged the call, and moved on. But when she played the recording back at the end of her shift, she heard something that hadn't been there while she was talking to the woman. A second, faint voice on the line, repeating Emma's own words half a beat behind her, like a bad echo that knew exactly what she was going to say. Emma Reyes worked nights in the Riverbend County 911 Center, a squat brick building tucked behind the sheriff's office and the municipal court. Her world was a bank of monitors, blinking status lights, and the endless hum of air conditioning pushing recycled air over tired operators. On paper, her job was simple: answer the phone, extract the important details, send help. In reality, she was part therapist, part detective, part confessional booth for a town that never really slept. She'd been on the job for 5 years, long enough to know the voices of the regular callers before they said their names. The man who dialed in every time his neighbor's music got too loud, the teenage pranksters who hung up giggling, the elderly shut-ins who just needed to hear another human being on the line and would invent a reason to call. Emma wasn't cynical about them. She knew that sometimes the crazy calls had a kernel of truth hiding underneath. A welfare complaint could turn into a full medical save. A weird smell could be a gas leak. You didn't get to choose which ones were real. Officer Mark Danner and his partner, Lisa Chen, were part of the small city police department that shared the radio frequency with Emma's console. Mark was mid-30s, steady, methodical, the kind of patrol officer who treated every barking dog and parking complaint with the same professionalism as a serious felony call. Lisa was sharper around the edges, newer to the force, still in that phase where she measured herself against every decision she made. The caller, Mrs. Irene Holloway, lived alone in a single-story house at the edge of Riverbend, in a quiet subdivision built in the late 60s. Emma pulled up her record after the first call. No prior contacts, no flagged issues, taxes paid, utilities current. A widowed retired school secretary according to the county database. Nothing out of the ordinary. No history of mental health checks or disorderly conduct. Just another older resident in a town that had more and more of them every year. The house itself, as Mark and Lisa would later note in their reports, was unremarkable from the outside. Faded vinyl siding, a small porch, a neat yard with a bird feeder and a ceramic frog near the steps. A single porch light illuminating the front door and the worn welcome mat. Inside, it smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old paper, the way houses do when someone has lived there for decades and kept every letter and receipt just in case. Emma's supervisor, a woman named Carla with 20 years under her belt, had drilled a particular principle into the night shift. You don't get to decide what's real for people. You log what they say, you send what's appropriate, and you document what happens. Our job is to take them seriously even when no one else does. So when Mrs. Holloway insisted there was someone in the walls, Emma didn't laugh, didn't roll her eyes, didn't tell her it was just mice. She sent Mark and Lisa to check it out, like policy demanded. Still, the phrase stuck with her more than she wanted to admit. Someone, not something, not pipes, not vermin, not the house settling. Someone. The first time Mark and Lisa went to Mrs. Holloway's house, the call type on their screen read simply, "Suspicious activity, possible intruder inside residence." It was the kind of thing they'd cleared 100 times. They parked at the curb, approached with flashlights, and found Irene Holloway waiting for them on the front porch in a worn robe and slippers, white hair pinned back, hands balled into anxious fists at her sides. "She says there's someone in her walls," Emma had told them over the radio, claims she's been hearing them walking behind the drywall. Inside, Irene led them down the narrow hallway, her voice a rapid whisper. "They only walk when I'm alone," she said. "They wait until I sit down, and then I hear them, scratching, dragging, like they're trying to find a way out." She stopped near the bedroom and pointed at a section of wall. "Right there. That's where they breathe." Mark and Lisa exchanged a quick look, professional neutral, not dismissive. "Ma'am, has anyone else heard this?" Mark asked gently. "Any family, neighbors?" "They don't visit at night," she replied. "Only you do." They checked the house like they always did, doors and windows secure, latches intact, attic access panel undisturbed. No fresh scuff marks on floors, no obvious signs of forced entry. The only thing that made them pause at all were the faint vertical scrapes on the drywall behind Irene's bedhead, as if something had dragged along the studs from the other side. They could have been from moving furniture. They could have been old. They photographed them anyway, because policy said to document anything the caller pointed out. "Could be rodents," Lisa suggested when they regrouped in the living room. "Squirrels in the attic, maybe. House like this, there are gaps in the soffits." "I had an exterminator last year," Irene said, a trace of indignation in her voice, "and rats don't whisper their names." "Whose names, ma'am?" Mark asked. She hesitated, eyes flicking toward the hallway. "Sometimes I hear yours," she said quietly, "and sometimes hers." She pointed, and for a moment it seemed like she was pointing straight through the wall toward Emma, miles away in the call center, listening over the open line. Back at the console, Emma felt a chill she tried to ignore. The audio on her end was clear. Irene's voice, the faint creak of old floorboards, the soft murmur of Mark and Lisa in the background. Nothing unusual. She logged their findings and classified the call as "no intruder found," per the officer's report. The second call came 2 nights later, same time, 2:13 a.m. Irene's voice was more urgent this time. "They're getting bolder," she said, barely waiting for Emma's greeting. "They're scratching harder. They're trying to get into my room. You have to send someone." Emma checked the prior call notes, saw the photographs attached, the description of the scrapes. She dispatched Mark and Lisa again because they were closest and because continuity mattered. Officers who'd been there before knew the layout, the context, the caller. This time, Mark checked the basement, flashlight beams sweeping across the concrete walls where decades of spiderwebs hung like tinsel. He found more marks, faint, parallel lines along a stud near the utility panel. Harmless, probably, just wood swelling and shrinking over time. But when he ran his fingers over them, he felt shallow grooves, as if made by something harder than fingernails, softer than a tool. "Could be mice chewing," he said into his body mic, half to Irene, half to Emma listening on the other end. "We're not seeing anyone here, ma'am. No signs of forced entry, no footprints outside." After they cleared the call again, Emma went back and replayed the audio like she sometimes did when a case nagged at her. She listened to her own voice guiding Irene through safety questions, to the calm, professional tone she'd learned to wear like armor. Halfway through the recording, she heard it, a faint, lagging echo repeating her words, half a second behind. At first, she thought it was line feedback. Then she realized the echo wasn't perfect. When she said, "Can you go to a room with a locked door?" the faint second voice whispered, "You can't go to a room with a locked door." When she asked, "Are you alone in the house?" the echo murmured, "You're never alone in the house." The cadence matched hers, but the content twisted, like someone mocking her line by line. Emma rewound the segment 3 times, headphones pressed to her ears. The waveform on the screen showed a thin, secondary track beneath her own, like a shadow under a stronger light. She checked the other side of the recording, no crosstalk from another dispatcher, no overlapping call, just her, Irene, and that almost but not quite echo. The third call came 4 nights after the first. Same house, same time window, same complaint. Only this time, Irene whispered as soon as Emma answered. "It's learning how you talk. It's practicing your voice when you're not here. I hear it." The third time they went out, everything felt slightly wrong from the moment the call came in. "911, what is your emergency?" Emma said, fingers already moving to pull up Irene's address on her screen. There was a long, shaky inhale. "He's in the walls again," Irene whispered. "But now he knows your name." Emma's fingers stilled above the keyboard. She swallowed, keeping her voice even. "Mrs. Holloway, this is Emma. Can you tell me what you're hearing right now?" He's repeating you," Irene said, "but he doesn't get it quite right, like a child learning to talk." Emma sent the call to the CAD system, marking it as priority welfare check, possible vulnerable adult in distress. "Units 12 and 14 respond to 218 Sycamore Lane," she dispatched, tone neutral. "Caller reports ongoing suspicious noises within walls, possible intruder, same residence as prior 2 calls." Mark acknowledged, Lisa close behind him on the radio. They were only a few minutes away. "Mrs. Holloway," Emma said quietly, "I'm going to stay on the line with you until the officers get there. Can you go sit in your living room where you feel safest?" There was a faint rustle, the creak of floorboards. Then Irene's voice again, sounding farther from the phone. "He doesn't like when you tell me what to do," she said. On Emma's screen, the call timer ticked upward. 30 seconds, 45, a minute. She could see the little icon showing which radio units were en route. She could hear Mark and Lisa in the background through their car mics. She was mid-sentence. "The officers are almost there, Mrs. Holloway. Just try to stay calm." When it happened, a second voice slipped into the line, threading between her words. This time it was clearer, closer, almost layered on top of her own. It repeated her sentence in the same rhythm, the same pacing, but with slight warps like a recording played on a warped tape. "The officers are almost there, Mrs. Holloway, just," it echoed, then added, "not in time." Emma froze. For a split second, she thought she had somehow heard a delayed playback of her own voice, some kind of loop glitch. But dispatch consoles didn't do that, not like this, and the last 2 words were wrong. "Say again, 911?" Mark's voice cut in over the radio, oblivious to what Emma had just heard on the phone line. "We're pulling up now." "Unit 12, copy that," she said automatically, forcing her hands to move, her voice to sound normal. "Caller is inside, reporting noises in walls. Use caution." On the line with Irene, there was a scraping sound, like something dragging along wood, then a soft, rhythmic tapping, as if at multiple points in the house at once. Irene's breathing sped up. "He's everywhere now," she whispered. "You should have believed me the first time." "Mark, Lisa, expedite," Emma said into the radio. "Caller sounds extremely distressed, possible medical component." Her supervisor glanced sharply, hearing the urgency in her voice. They reached the house in under 2 minutes. Body cam footage would later show Mark and Lisa moving quickly up the walkway, the porch light flickering above them. The curtains were drawn tight, no movement visible from outside. They knocked and announced themselves, per policy. No answer. They could hear the faint ring of a phone inside, like Irene had set it down and walked away. Per procedure, they checked doors and windows. The back door was locked, kitchen window latched, no forced entry. When they called her name, "Mrs. Holloway, it's the police," there was no immediate response. Then, faintly from somewhere inside the house, they heard a single knock, not on the front door, not on a wall near them. It sounded like it came from deep within the structure, a hollow thump that echoed through the framing. Mark made the call. "Dispatch, Unit 12. We're not making contact with the caller, and we've got concerning sounds from inside, requesting permission to force entry."
Emma's gaze flicked from their GPS location to the call timer. Irene's line had gone eerily quiet. No breathing, no background noise, just an open connection. 12:14, you are authorized to force entry for welfare check. Advise once inside. The body cam video of them breaking the front door and clearing the rooms became evidence. Later, it captured details Emma would only see after the fact. The living room immaculate, every cushion in place, dustless shelves. The kitchen counters wiped clean, no dishes in the sink. The bedroom bed made tight, quilts smoothed. No tossed blankets, no signs of someone recently in distress. It looked like a house staged for sale, not one where an elderly woman had been living alone. "Ma'am?" Lisa called, her voice echoing through the empty hallway. "Riverbend Police Department, we're here to help." They cleared each room one by one. No Irene, no signs of a struggle, no blood, no overturned furniture. The only trace that someone had been there at all were the indentations in the bedroom carpet where a chair had recently sat, now missing, and the faint groove where the phone cord had worn into the wall by the nightstand. Then Mark opened the metal grate of a floor vent in the hallway. He lifted the cover, shining his flashlight into the duct. The beam illuminated a thin layer of dust and, in the center, a set of clear handprints on the sheet metal. 2 small palms pressed outward from the inside, fingers splayed, prints trailing off as if someone had smeared them along the tunnel. There was no debris, no tools, no vermin, just those pale, disturbed shapes in the dust where nothing should have been able to reach. "Dispatch?" Mark began, his voice tightening. "We're not locating the resident. House appears recently cleaned. No sign of forced entry. We do have unusual marks inside a vent." Emma stared at the empty line on her screen where the call timer kept ticking. "Copy," she said softly. "I'm ending the call log for now. We'll list the resident as missing until verified otherwise." That night, for the first time in 5 years, she pulled off her headset mid-shift and went to the bathroom just to breathe. In the mirror, under harsh fluorescent light, she looked like someone else, paler, eyes wider, shoulders stiff. When she returned to her console, the call was archived. The system had automatically saved the audio.
The official report read like a puzzle with missing pieces. Responded to residential welfare check at 218 Sycamore. No contact with caller upon arrival. Force entry authorized by dispatch. Residents found unoccupied. No signs of force entry or disturbance. Furniture and belongings present, but home appears recently deep cleaned. Notified Adult Protective Services and next of kin on file. Resident listed as missing. The handprints in the vent were noted under additional observations with a photograph attached, but no one could explain how they'd gotten there. Detectives interviewed the few relatives Irene had, nieces and nephews scattered in other states who hadn't spoken to her in months. They swore they knew nothing about her disappearance, were shocked she'd vanished. Someone from Adult Protective Services went through Irene's paperwork and found no evidence she'd arranged to move to assisted living, no travel plans, no large withdrawals from her accounts. Her bank card remained unused, her car sat in the driveway, tires gathering dust. In the weeks that followed, the case file on Irene Holloway thickened with the kind of details that never found a neat conclusion. Neighbors reported that her lawn had been mowed the day before the third call, but no one saw who had done it. The mail in her box stopped the same day the officers forced entry. Deliveries from the grocery subscription she used piled up and then were returned to sender. There was nothing that screamed foul play, nothing that screamed voluntary disappearance, just absence. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that they had missed something crucial in those calls, some clue lurking in the words between the words. On her days off, she found herself back at the console after hours, with permission from Carla, pulling up the archived recordings. The system logged them by incident number, date, time.
She replayed them through headphones, eyes closed, body still. The echo was there on every one. On the first call, faint and faulty, the second voice merely repeated portions of what she said, sometimes overlapping syllables, sometimes trailing off, like a signal trying to lock onto a channel. On the second, it was bolder, adding those twisted negations, flipping her reassurances inside out. On the third, it spoke nearly in sync with her, as if it had learned the shape of her sentences, the music of her pauses. Emma began to doubt her own sanity. She asked one of the other dispatchers to listen to a segment, without context. "Do you hear anything weird on this?" she asked, cursor hovering over the waveform. He tilted his head, listened, then shrugged. "Just some background noise," he said. "Old houses creak, landlines hum, you know how it is." He didn't hear the echo, or if he did, he didn't recognize it for what it was. When she played it to Carla, her supervisor listened longer, brow furrowing. "Could be artifacting," Carla said carefully. "We've had some issues with the new recording servers, remember? Packet loss, duplicates. It might be picking up a bit of someone else's audio and layering it in. I'll have IT look at it." IT did look. Their report came back full of technical jargon about compression, line noise, and phantom packets. No operational concern, it concluded. Users may perceive occasional echoes or artifacts due to network latency. A tidy explanation that didn't mention voices that responded to content rather than timing. On patrol, Mark and Lisa went on to other calls, family disputes, DUIs, routine alarms. Still, whenever a welfare check came across their screen, there was a momentary tightening in their throats. It was one thing to clear a false alarm, it was another to lose the person altogether. In briefing, the lieutenant used Irene's case as a reminder of how vulnerable older residents could be. He framed it as a cautionary tale about social isolation, about the need to involve social services early, about documenting mental status even when no crime had been committed. Off the record, though, some officers muttered about the wall lady and joked nervously about hearing things in their own houses at night. "Every department has its unsolveds," Rick told Emma one evening when he found her staring at the incident board. "Cases that don't fit, people who vanish. If you let every one of them live in your head, you won't last." Emma nodded, but inside, the second voice answered, mimicking him. "If you let every one of them live in your head, you'll never be alone."
Time moved on, as it always did in a profession built on the next call. The missing person flyers with Irene's picture yellowed, then came down. Her house eventually went into probate, then onto the market. When a young couple with a toddler and another baby on the way moved in, they had the ducts cleaned, the walls repainted, the vents replaced. The handprints in the dust were vacuumed away along with decades of accumulated lint. To them, it was just another starter home with a bit of history attached. At the 911 center, the incident number for Irene's calls sat in the system like a frozen moment in time. 3 entries, same address, escalating notes, unresolved outcome. Emma learned to live with the fact that not every story reached a neat conclusion. She talked more with the newer dispatchers about how to handle repeat callers compassionately, about listening for changes in their tone that might signal a deeper problem. "Sometimes the emergency isn't what they say it is," she would tell them. "Sometimes it's underneath." She never completely stopped hearing the echo. Some nights, during a lull between calls, she would pull up a random recording to spot-check the audio quality. It was part of her job now, making sure the system captured everything clearly for liability and training. Most calls were mundane: fender benders, noise complaints, alarms triggered by curious cats. The audio tracks were clean, single-voiced, no anomalies. Then, one evening about 6 months after Irene's disappearance, Emma took a call that should have been as routine as they came. A woman dialing in about a minor hit-and-run in a grocery store parking lot. No injuries, just a dented bumper and an absent driver. Emma guided her through the usual: location, description, whether anyone was hurt, license plate if available. The conversation was straightforward, the kind of call Emma could almost do in her sleep, but something about the cadence felt off. Not enough to pinpoint, just a slight doubling on certain words, a faint shadow behind her own phrases. After she cleared the call and handed it over to patrol, she flagged the recording for review. When the cue slowed, she played it back. There it was again, fainter this time, buried deeper under the main track, but unmistakable once she heard it. As she said, "Can you stay by your vehicle until an officer arrives?" The thin second voice whispered, "You can't stay by your vehicle until I arrive." As she asked, "Are you in a safe place right now?" it murmured, "You are not in a safe place right now." The caller hadn't reacted at all during the live conversation. To her, there had been one voice on the line. The echo belonged only to Emma and the recording system, if it belonged anywhere at all. She took the clip to Carla again, hand slightly trembling as she passed over the headset. "Listen to this," she said. "Just tell me what you hear." Carla listened, eyes narrowing, then pulled the headphones off slowly. Rather than offer an explanation, she asked a different question. "Do you feel like you're losing your grip on what's real?" she said gently. "Because if you are, we need to know. We can get you help. This job takes a toll." Emma understood the implication. If she insisted too loudly that the recordings were mimicking her, someone would slap a label on her: stressed, burned out, possibly unstable, fit for duty evaluations, time off she hadn't asked for. She weighed that against the undeniable truth of what her own ears were telling her. "I hear some artifacts," she said, finally choosing her words with care. "Maybe from that same server issue. I'll send it to IT again. In the meantime, I'll schedule a day or two off." Carla nodded, relieved. "Good," she said. "Everyone needs a reset sometimes. Don't let this place live in your head rent-free." On her first morning off, Emma sat at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee going cold in her hands, listening to the sounds of her own apartment, the fridge ticking, upstairs neighbors moving, a distant siren 2 neighborhoods away. She thought about Irene, alone in her meticulously kept house, hearing something move where no one believed it could. She thought about all the people who dialed 911, not just because of what they saw, but because of what they knew no one else would believe. She could have switched to another shift, another center, another job. She considered it, but in the end, she stayed. Not because she was fearless, and not because she was certain of what she had experienced, but because she understood something fundamental about the work. You didn't have to believe every story to take every call seriously. You didn't have to solve every mystery to show up for the next one. So Emma did what she had always done. She put her headset back on, logged into her console, and waited for the next voice to cut through the line. When the line clicked open and someone said, "911, what is your emergency?" she replied in the steady tone she had practiced for years, listening not just for what they said, but for what might be hiding in the spaces in between.
If you were in Emma's chair, listening to an elderly woman insist someone was living in her walls, would you write it off as confusion? Or would you keep digging, even when the evidence refused to line up neatly? How many times would you be willing to send officers, review recordings, and push against the limits of your own understanding before you started doubting either the caller or yourself? And in your own life, when someone tells you something that sounds impossible but feels real to them, do you dismiss it for your own comfort, or do you sit with the discomfort long enough to ask what danger, loneliness, or truth might be hiding behind their words?